It's Divas That Care Radio. Stories, strategies, and ideas to inspire positive change. Welcome to Divas That Care, a network of women committed to making our world a better place for everyone. This is a global movement for women, by women, engaged in a collaborative effort to create a better world for future generations. To find out more about the movement, visit divasthatcare.com after the show. Right now, though, stay tuned for another jolt of inspiration.
A strong, positive sense of self-esteem is your first step to anything you wish to accomplish. Yet too often we attempt to leave our comfort zone. We have that chorus of inner critics inside our heads. The itty-bitty shitty committee, as I like to call mine, whispering self-sabotaging doubt and untrue trash talk in our ear. Confidence in Bloom celebrates women who rise above and move beyond any self-doubt and old, outmoded, limiting beliefs. Women who have reconnected with who they truly are, that gorgeous, talented, fabulous gift to the world who deserve recognition and unconditional love. My hope is that their insights inspire all of you to do the same. You know, the most beautiful thing any woman can wear is confidence. Here with the Divas That Care Network, I, Tina Spolatini, speak with women now secure in their own self-confidence so we can learn from their stories of how they found themselves and became the magnificent role models they are all to us now. Today, I'm chatting with Patricia Stepler. Patricia is a transformational coach and speaker dedicated to helping business owners and entrepreneurs get off the cash flow roller coaster and earning 6 to 7 figures in a year. With a background in education and corporate training, Patricia empowers her clients to develop confidence in entrepreneurial thinking, leading to increased profits, productivity, and the freedom to live life on their terms. Inspired by her son's success in manifesting a full college scholarship and her personal coaching experience with Bob Proctor, Patricia specializes in mindset development, leveraging the law of attraction and universal laws to help individuals achieve their goals and tap into their limitless potential while building a strong foundation in their business so they can scale. Welcome, Patricia.
Thank you, Tina, for inviting me.
Yeah, this is great. I would like to know more about your son and how he manifested a scholarship.
Yeah, well, that's kind of an amazing story in my mind, and that led me to my business. But when he was 12, apparently one night at dinner, we were talking about my oldest daughter being in college, and my second daughter was about to go to college. And so he decided to take upon himself the idea that we didn't need to save money for him. He was going to get a full scholarship. And of course, at the time, I never believed him, but I didn't tell him that. I let him believe his little fantasy. And yeah, he kept telling me this over and over. And he decided he wanted to be a collegiate athlete. And I kept thinking, what are the odds? I mean, yes, he had talent for a 12-year-old, but he was also bigger than most of the kids that he, played ball with in 12. But I just kept letting him say that. And he did seem to set goals in sports, whether it was hitting home runs or scoring touchdowns or making so many baskets. And those are the three sports he played, the football, basketball, and baseball. And he would just hit those goals, but he kept telling me this over and over and over again for 6 years. And when he finally, as with all of us, when we set a goal and we have something we want, roadblocks get in the way. Nobody is immune from that. And, sometimes it's just that we don't know all the answers and we don't know where the best possibility is. So sometimes those roadblocks are actually showing us a different way. Well, that's what happened to him. He got discouraged. He, had some roadblocks that got in his way, but it showed him a different path. So the school that was interested in him told us 1/3 to 1/2 was all he could expect from this scholarship. And so when the letter came, he just held on to it. We were going for dinner and, got the mail and handed him his letter. And we knew because of the size of the package that it was a scholarship letter. And he just kept saying, Mom, wouldn't it be funny if it's a full scholarship? And I, as mom protecting him, was like, now, they told us 1/3 to 1/2. And, I didn't want him to feel like he let us down because I never believed that he'd get it anyhow. So anything was better than nothing, right? And so when he finally opened it and we saw the amount, it was a full scholarship. And it was an academic scholarship, it was not an athletic scholarship, but he got to play baseball at the school. They did recruit him for baseball, but it was an academic scholarship. And I knew at that moment that he had caused it to happen. I just didn't know how. Through all the personal development I'd had for years and years, I knew he had caused it. And I had to find the answers. And as we were eating dinner that night, I started to get really angry because I'm thinking, how did he do this? I haven't been able to do anything since I've had all this personal development. How did he do it? So that led me on my journey, which eventually led me to start my own business, because as much as I admire my son and think he's wonderful, I know other people are just as wonderful and can do exactly what he did. So I had to find the answers so that I could help others.
Wow. And so, I mean, that's like a beautiful story, really, right? I mean, obviously the money you were putting away could now be used for anything else, like,
Right.
his wedding or whatever, right?
Right.
So I'm interested to know, okay, so now that you're like, you want to find out how he did this.
Mm-hmm.
What was your next step? How did you go about learning about manifesting?
Have you ever heard the idea or thought that when the student's ready, the teacher appears? And I was
Ah,
so ready and so searching. And so I came across Bob Proctor. And while I had heard his name, because I'd done personal development for 30 years up to this point, and I'd heard his name, but I never came across him. And he was never at any of the conventions or the conferences I went to. I never had any of his materials, but all of a sudden he just appeared. And as soon as I saw him and heard him talk, I thought, this man knows the answers. So I started listening to him. And then eventually, I reached out to one of those emails that you get and talked to one of his sales reps. And, because I was so convinced that he could show me the answers, I joined his company as becoming a certified consultant. And I just went to everything he was doing because I just had to keep learning more and more from this man. And up until that point, honestly, I'd never heard of the law of attraction. That was not in any of the personal development I'd done. I never knew about manifesting your dreams, nothing like that. And it was just so beautiful to me. And it was like, I know this is what my son did. And then of course my son had no idea what he had done. And so I spent I still teach him things, and I will relate to him. You remember when you did this? This is how this happened. And so it was in, showing him what he had done. And as I did that, he started sharing more things with me, which was just amazing. Like as many times as he told me he was getting a scholarship, every time he went to practice, every time he went to game, that's all we thought about was a scholarship. It was that total thought process of this is where I'm headed and that determination. And he did things other kids wouldn't do, and that's what we have to do. And we quit too soon. We give up on ourselves too soon. He had 6 years because there was 6 years that was taking from the time he was 12 till we graduated. And so he knew it was a 6-year journey. How many of us will give up 6 years of our lives to pursue a dream that it takes 6 years to see anything come out of?
yeah. And yet we'll sit back and wait for those 6 years.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah,
Exactly.
like, right? Like we're waiting for that time to appear and not
Right.
working towards it, making it, maybe possible, 3 years earlier than that. And so, okay, so I don't really know, but I know of Bob Proctor. I don't really know
Mhm.
like too much about what he teaches and what, like what he says. Um,
Mhm.
and I know that, okay, so there's many, like obviously his thing is the law of attraction.
It is the law of attraction and how the
Right.
mind works. Yes.
Right. And that there's many, like I know of Abraham
Yes.
Hicks and
Yes.
I
Mhm.
think the secret, but I think the secret is more a mixture of many different authors. Am I right? Bob
It
Proctor
is,
one of
yes.
them? Yeah.
And Bob Proctor is one of the main people in The Secret, yes.
Right, right. And so The Secret is basically just who it's worked for, I'm guessing.
Right.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I've seen the movie, I've read the book, but I don't really remember it. Clearly something that didn't, stand out to me. So now, so now you've learned Bob Proctor, you've learned how he works, you're working kind of alongside him, and you're getting clients of your own. How, like, what is this? Like, how does this, like, how are you helping other women or other men to use the law of attraction to, move forward in their daily lives?
So it's really getting them to understand that the thoughts that we hold in our mind daily are important to what we bring into our life. And, we can hold thoughts of the good that we want, or we can hold thoughts of what we don't want to have happen. But here's the trick in the universe, that if you start thinking of the things that you don't want to happen, those things will actually come into your life. Because the universe, whatever you're putting out there is what's going to pick up. And so it doesn't say, oh, that's not what somebody wants, and it gives it to them. And then we say, oh, we never have any good luck, or, we think it's all luck. And it's not, it's what your predominant thoughts are. And so we often self-sabotage ourselves because we know what we want, but we don't believe we can get it. And so that belief is huge, because you can't hold those are two opposing ideas, and you can't hold those two ideas in your head at the same time of, yes, this is what I want, but I don't believe I can get it. And so
that's like the limiting beliefs. Okay.
Yes.
So now when we have these limiting beliefs that, I don't deserve that, or I can't have that, how does the universe decide that that's what we're going to get? Because because we're not working towards what we think we want?
Exactly. So your actions, so your subconscious mind holds all those thoughts of everything that's happened in your life is stored in that subconscious mind. And so let's say like confidence, because confidence and your self-image are a huge part of your subconscious mind. And, very well-meaning people can tell you things like, I was telling somebody the other day how painfully shy I was as a child. And I remember one of the students I taught school prior to going into business. I remember this one student I had who chose to be mute. And that was her decision. She talked at home, but she would not talk in school. And everybody would tell her how shy she was, and, just reinforced that whole idea of her not talking. And so we can allow that to happen into our minds. And that stores in our subconscious mind all those ideas and things that we've heard about us in the past, or things we've believed about ourselves, or stories we tell. And so when you go to step out and do something new, all those thoughts, which we call paradigms, all those thoughts come rushing in to protect us, because that's what it's supposed to do. That's the job. Its job is to protect us from anything that might harm us. But the very good that we want is what is protecting us from getting. So we have to learn to reprogram our subconscious mind the same way it was programmed, by repetition, and reprogram that thought process so that we're getting rid of those things we do not want.
Okay,
And
I like that concept.
That reinforcement.
Right. Now, when you say reprogram, it's not just a matter of like reading affirmations to yourself every day. There's more to it than that, right? It's like proof, right? Like you need to prove to your subconscious that you are able and willing to do the work so that you can bring in whatever it is you're working towards.
Right. And it's a matter of just like really believing that you deserve it. And I like to use visualization a lot, or writing out who I am in another month, or who I am in another year, or what I'm expecting at the end of the year, and seeing myself deserving of those things. And the more you keep reinforcing that idea of where you're headed, and you start to visualize yourself actually in that spot. You have to become that person first before you'll ever see it in your reality. So in your mind, you have to become it first. And as you do that, and you keep reinforcing that, opportunities, people, events, things will come into your life if you don't reject them. And the only way you reject them is by allowing those paradigms to come back and want to protect you. So sometimes it's a matter of taking a leap of faith, and sometimes that leap of faith fails you, but it's getting back up and saying, okay, that wasn't the answer, but still being willing to put yourself out there, because not everything's going to work. I remember one of the clients, one of my most successful clients I worked with, they tried a couple things and they were abject failures at them. And it was just a stepping stone to find the next thing. They tried, they took some type of action, they trusted. And sometimes I believe that some of those, what we would call failures, are not really failures, they're tests. And that's why I tried to encourage them. These are tests along the way to see how determined you are. And if this doesn't work, are you still willing to pick yourself up and move on and try something else? And I think it's really just, I mean, anybody can be successful, but do you have the stamina to really do it in a big way? Or are you just going to let the world just kind of decide for you where you're going to be successful and when you're not going to be successful?
Right, right. Well, I mean, the whole concept of the law of attraction is really, it's really interesting, right?
Yeah,
Like to
yes.
bring in something that, is sort of far from what you are like every day thinking and doing,
Mhm.
right? Is
Right.
amazing. And I did have one of the coaches I worked with, she wanted a new car. The car she had was like, it, was a beater, that's
Mhm.
what would call it. And she kept saying, I need a new car, I need a new car. And she was in a car accident, right?
Uh,
And so her car got finished, right? I mean, it was already, done,
mhm.
but it was like undrivable after. And so she ended up with a new car. And she didn't think about it until, a couple months after. And she had, of course, a little bit of whiplash and, some tension in her back and stuff. And she was like, you need to be specific. You
Yeah,
need to be
exactly.
so specific, because she said, I asked for a new car, yes. And I'm, I obviously I know I have to pay for it, but I did not want to pay for it, with my physical body, right?
Right.
I wanted to just be able to afford to go into a store and say, I want that car, right? So
Right.
you need to be really, really specific when you are asking the universe to help you out, and to, when you're manifesting whatever it is that you're looking for. and
Yes.
and so,
Mhm.
obviously my question to you is that, is that the case? And
It is.
by your reaction, I'm going to say absolutely, right?
Yes, it is. And, sometimes when, after I started learning this information, I could look back in my past and see times when I had manifested something. I just didn't know I was doing it. And that's the real problem. We've all done it. There's times in our lives where we've all used the law of attraction, whether we realize it or not. And most of us don't realize it. And if you don't know, then you can't repeat it, which is why I took the time to explain it to my son, because I wanted him to repeat things over and over again. But even this is just kind of a funny thing. When I first started teaching, I taught music. And when I started teaching, I thought, I would really like to become a college choral director. But, I just shoved that in the back of the shelf, and I thought, yeah, I started having kids and it just wasn't practical, and that's what I believe. It wasn't practical. It wasn't possible. And so I dismissed it. And then a year ago, I got the opportunity to direct a choir at a college level. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is something I always wanted to do. Just kind of pushed it in the back. And now the opportunity is in front of me. And you know what I did? I tried to find every reason to not take the position. And and finally it was like every time I would come up with a reason as to why I just wasn't going to do it, they'd tell me something and I'd think, okay, well that went better than I thought, and eventually I took the position. I loved it. And it was so much fun because I actually got to do something I'd always wanted to do.
Yeah.
you know?
And so why do we do that? Because I've heard that many times. It's something I've always wanted to do, and yet we look for reasons to not do it when the time comes.
Yeah.
I caught myself doing that just the other day. It was for, something very small, but I wanted to get myself like a networking meeting out of the house. It wasn't online.
Mhm.
And an opportunity came up, and I all of a sudden started with all these excuses, right? Why
Right.
do we do that? Like why? Like, what is
It
that?
just all goes back to those paradigms. We don't think, for in my example there, I think I went back to, but I don't have a choral conducting degree, and I kept going back to that. It was like I was allowing myself to say, I don't think I'm good enough to do this, even though I've been directing choirs for years. I just, I think there is a strong pull inside, and I think women have this problem more than men of not being good enough. And, finding reasons for why maybe we don't think we measure up to where we think
Yeah.
we should be.
Well,
And
how
I
do
think
you,
you
yeah,
just have to keep overcoming that.
yeah. And so, how do you help how do you do that? How do you overcome these limiting beliefs that keep coming back up? I mean, I know we can break them, we can release them, but I mean,
Mhm.
they're pretty deep, right? And so
They
they
are
will
deep.
often come back up. So how do you walk your clients through that? How do you walk yourself through that?
So basically you have to start seeing yourself as deserving. And every morning, so in the mornings I'll sit down and I'll just write a story to myself, of projecting who I need to be. Because like I said, you have to become the person first. So let's say you want the next job, you want to be the manager, and you've got to see yourself being the manager. You have to believe that you are the manager. You go to work being the manager. And that's what I did when I wanted to go from teaching to corporate training. Every day I walked in to teach children, I pretended I was walking into a hotel or a conference center. And when I was teaching the children, I pretended in my mind that I was actually leading a workshop or, some type of training with adults. And I did that for an entire year until I got an offer. And, it's just believing that and seeing yourself doing it and pretending, really pretending that you are somebody that you don't think you are today. And you
So this
project yourself as that other person, the one you
Yeah, so
want to be.
this is bringing up some things for me. So I'm just imagining. So first of all, like the act as if, this is what the act as if
Mhm.
is, right? Act as if you
Yes.
already own or have that position or car or whatever it is that you're trying to manifest. But is it also like, it's also making me question that whole authenticity? Like, are you being yourself if you're pretending to be someone you're not? Right? I mean, you're not pretending to be someone different. You're just pretending to be in a position that you don't hold. So is
Correct.
that it? Like, I'm just, questioning that whole
So,
authenticity segment here.
right. And, to me, there's a difference between acting as if and faking it till you make it, which is another thing you'll often hear people say, just fake it till you make it. That one I have trouble with. But
So
when
they're
you're
not the same. They're not the same thing.
exactly.
Right.
So when you're acting as if, let's say you want to be that manager, maybe it's you dress in a little different way. So you're portraying the image to the company and to yourself that you are now dressing like the manager. Maybe the managers are wearing suits. So you get some suits and you start wearing them and you project that. And then if there's something going the extra mile, let's say there's a job and it's really not your job, but if you help out your manager, they'll see that. And so you volunteer to do some things, even though it's not your job, and they see that. And that to me is acting as if, because in your mind, you are the manager, you just don't have the title yet.
Right.
And
Right. And the
eventually
reality
people
is,
will see
the job.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reality is, what that's going to take from you. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot more sense.
So
And
that's
still
more, maybe
being
it's not pretending, but maybe it's just doing some different actions that put you in, and even thinking like, okay, if I was the manager, what would I do in this position? Or
Right.
what would I do in this situation?
Right. And
And
it's not,
then
yeah.
doing it. So it
Right.
is a way of authenticity. You're just not in that position yet.
Right. And it's not like, oh, I'll never let my kids do that. Right. Like I remember we all said that, right, when we didn't have kids.
Right.
And then we have kids and we're seeing that they're doing absolutely everything we said they wouldn't do. Right. Because I mean, the reality of that is every scenario is different. Right. Every position is different. Yeah. Okay. I like that. I like the way you
Yeah.
said that.
And just to get back to my son, in the current job he has, that's exactly what he did. He got a promotion because he was willing to take something off the plate of his boss and volunteer to do it. And so he did that. And I was like, that's exactly the way to do it. So he, did something extra that it was not his job, taking it off his boss's plate, and his boss acknowledged it and put him in for promotion.
Oh my goodness. So your son is like, he was born with this manifesting law of attraction.
I think he was.
Yeah. And so like, that's my next question. Does he's clearly doing that throughout his life now?
Yes.
Wow. And so does this work? Like, I mean, obviously we're talking like jobs, positions, but does it work like with other things? Like when you're manifesting, like, like a partner or, a new house, it must work all the same.
It does.
Yeah. So
yes, I know people that will like write a description of their ideal partner, and then they'll, down the road, they find that person. So yes, I think it works in all areas of our lives.
I think so too. And,
it works in relationships. If one of my clients was having a difficult time dealing with one of her clients, and I said, you know what, the next time you go to see her, you have to change who you are. And you have to reach out to her, and think of her as, instead of being difficult to work with, being easy to work with. And here's what happens when she did that, and it was not easy, but when she did that, when you treat somebody else differently than what you've treated them in the past, they have to react differently to you too. It's just a natural. So it's a way to use the law of attraction, seeing things differently in whatever situation you're in.
Yeah. I have, that's funny. I have a little story about that. So when I was growing up, I decided that, so I come from an Italian background, and I love my dad to death. I wouldn't trade him in for the world, but I always said, I will not marry Italian because I will not marry my dad. Right.
Okay.
Well, I did, like, I would explain, this is the kind of person I want to be my partner for life. And I found him, or he found me. I'm not really sure how that goes, but he's Italian. Right. And he said the same thing about his partner. Like he said, I will not marry an Italian. So here we are. We both agreed that we did not want Italian partners. We both ended up with partners, but we both ended up with not our mother and our father. Like, and I laugh because is that manifesting, or is that just, like God's way of saying, this is who you're meant to be with? Right. Because I was, I mean, I love my dad to death, but to have him as a husband, I don't think I can handle it.
Yeah.
I know.
So you were looking for different qualities.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So it's really interesting how this all works. And I know of another lady who did manifest a house, and I believe that she teaches this as well. Like, how do you teach this? How do you, show women or men, I'm assuming you work with both, like, how do you sort of walk them through a path? Like, because you start with your limiting beliefs, right? Like, what's your goal? Why haven't you got it yet is what I'm assuming you would start with, right? Like, why haven't you got what you're working towards? Like, what is
exactly
it? Yeah. So then you work on beliefs. And how do you do that? Like, how do you allow your clients to release these beliefs?
Well, first of all, they do have to identify them, figure out where their limiting beliefs are. And then we have to start looking at, okay, so this is where you are now. What's wrong with that picture? Where do you want to be? How far distance is that? and really start to say, okay, so what do we need to change? And a lot of it, if we were the person today that could achieve our goal, we'd already have it. And then we have to look at who do we need to become? Because it really is a matter of changing ourselves. We can't change other people, but we can change ourselves.
We've been trying that for generations, haven't we? Yeah.
Yeah, we can't
Yeah.
change anybody that doesn't want to be changed. And that's the way
Hey,
my clients are. I can't change them or help them to change unless they want to change. I can't do it for them. They have to be the one willing to change. But you have to become somebody different, whether that's building more confidence, whether that is going back to building your belief system, seeing that you deserve things, changing, the image that you're holding of yourself, because the image you're holding of yourself is restricting you to what you have today. And you know what? You may love what you have today. You may be very, very satisfied and wonderful. That's great. But if you want something more, which to me, life is always about expanding and becoming more. And so if you want something more, then you're going to have to change something. But here's what a lot of people do. They get out of school and they think they're done. And they don't have to learn anything more. And then they just allow life to just toss them around. And sure, they'll make incremental gains. Most people do. But if you really want to make something really magnificent, then you have to stretch beyond where you are.
right. And also like know that this is just the beginning, right?
Yeah,
Wherever you are.
it's
the beginning. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So what about, okay, so let's say client comes into your office and says, okay, like I am happy with everything I have, right? It's not that I'm not grateful or, like I love what I have, but I want more, right? I feel like I'm lazy. I feel like I'm unmotivated, uninspired. There's nothing. I know there's more out there for me, but I don't know how to get it. And I don't even know what I want to bring into my life. Where do we go? What do I do?
Yeah, that was me.
Oh, really?
So,
okay. So
yes,
you know
yes.
exactly how to
So,
do this.
I taught school, and I remember when I said I did some corporate training, one seminar I went to, I was watching this trainer and I'm thinking, I could do that. And again, I stuck in the back of my mind. But then actually, after my son got that scholarship, I'm like, I can retire from teaching. And so that's when I decided to go after corporate training, because it was something I always wanted to do and thought I could be very good at. And so I did that and, manifested that in my life. But at that point, when he got that scholarship, I was like, what is there more for me to do? Because he was my last child. And, my life up until that point was so focused on raising my kids. I wanted them to be good citizens and to be productive in society. And now they were all grown in college or out of college, and they were doing that. So it was like, okay, who am I? And I really had to go back and say, all this time I've spent, I was always somebody's mom. I feel like a lot of people didn't even know my name because they'd say, oh, you're Danny's mom, or you're Rachel's mom, or you're Renee's mom. Nobody knew my name. And so that's where I was. What am I supposed to do? And I read that book, The Purpose Driven Life, and I kept thinking, what is my purpose? There's got to be something more than what I was doing. But up until that point, my life was all focused on my 3 kids and teaching schools and trying to do the best for the students I had. And that was like, I get to live my own life. And so it was a matter of, and then all this just kind of came into about, and it was like, I always wanted to be in business. So now I got to be into business and to coach people and to train businesses. And, that was my purpose. It was showing people more. How can I help somebody else become more than what they are? And that's what led me to doing a lot of what I'm doing now, because I felt that that was the purpose I was giving.
And now you're feeling like
how can I help people? Because a lot of people struggle with that. Isn't there more to life than what I've got? Yes, there is more to life than what you've got, but you have to change some things because we predominantly just kind of stay the same most of our lives if we don't,
Yeah.
find something way to change.
And we kind of grow like, okay, so our purpose, I know, like, in my family anyway, it seems like we were, your purpose is to be a kid, right? And then you're married and you have kids of your own and you raise your kids, and then you just kind of are there for when your kids need you, right? That, I mean, basically that's what it looks like to me.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But I look at, like, when I got through that, like when my kids were like older, I was like, okay, so now what? Right. I mean, yes, I know they're always going to need me, and absolutely, I'm always going to be here for them. But what am I going to do with my time when they are not needing me?
Exactly.
Right. And so now what? Now, how does my life look when I'm, not feeding them or, doing what they need from me? Right. And I'm at the stage where I'm not a grandparent. Right. And I hope not to be for a few more years. But, God has that planned for me, I'm sure. But at the same time, like, I don't have that, where my kids need me all day, every day. And so I needed, like you, needed to find something that would fulfill me. Right. And then it made me realize our purpose is not, when we're born, like, your purpose is not going to be, this is what you'll do for the rest of your life. Right. You have a purpose for every stage of your life. Right. Like, we all here for this chapter. Right. And so this chapter's purpose is this, like, we raised our kids, that takes, 18 to 20 years roughly. Right. And then after that is your next chapter. Right. So it's like, yeah. And I'm just thinking, like, how we don't see that at the time. Right. Until we look back. And we look and we go, yeah, so that was my purpose then, right? What do I do now? Because I think, and I'm just assuming that manifesting a bright future is not enough, right? Because what is a bright future?
Yeah.
Right? So it has to be, like you said, you have to change a few things. And in order for it to be bright, it's your bright. So what does a bright future look like to you?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Right. And so then, we have to decide who we need to be to have the future that we're looking for. We have to know what that future is. That's really hard work.
It is. And you know what? That's something we never take time to find out who we are. How many times do you see a child going into a similar occupation as one of their parents? Or you see them floundering, like, I don't know what to do, so I guess I'll just do this. We never take time, and nobody ever teaches us how to really dig deep and figure out who we are. So that's another thing that I do with clients is, like, who are you? Are you you, or are you what other people think you should be? And that's, you have a lot of parents that are trying to project onto their child who they think their child should be.
And often that's who
that child really is.
Yeah.
And so we never really get to know who we are.
Wow. That's super, super deep. I'm just imagining, like, I hope I didn't do that with my kids, but I'm imagining how hard it would be, to really dig down deep and realize that, I've been who I've wanted to be all these years. I just didn't know I was doing it. Or I am, like, completely opposite of who I really want to be.
Right. Wow. And that does happen.
I bet it does. Yeah. Well,
I remember a friend of my nephew, like, when he was in college, he would just keep saying his dad was an attorney. He says, I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't want to do that. And when he graduated in like public speaking. And when he graduated, he went and took the LSATs. And I'm like, why? And he went to law school for, I think, a semester or two. It didn't last there, but he was by the time he graduated with his bachelor's degree, he didn't really know who he was or what he wanted to do. So he decided to follow the path of his dad to be a lawyer, and he quickly dropped out of that. And then he went into marketing. I'm like, brilliant. That's exactly what you did.
Wow.
Because his personality was so much, into marketing was just a great fit. It gave him a chance to use his public speaking and things like that. But he almost got into that trap, and you see that.
Yeah, I've heard so many stories. And then, when they hit their 40s, when they start realizing, like, is this it? Is this my life?
Yes.
Then
Mhm.
then they make the change, right?
Yeah.
That's proof to say that there's always time for change. There's always
Well,
time to do what you really love, right? But you're
yeah.
always going to look back at those years and go, wow, I can't believe I wasted my time, right?
Yeah.
I could have had
And
so much.
honestly, I fell into that trap because I'm a third generation educator.
Uh-huh.
And while I was, had that like skill, I guess, of teaching, it's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a
Uh-huh.
performer. And my mom was like, no, you need to get an education background. Don't make the same mistake I did, because that's what she did. And she went back to school later on to get her education degree. And so it was like, don't make my mistake. Well, while I was in college, I really wanted to get a business degree, but I knew what a burden it was on my parents. So I just graduated with my music degree, my music ed degree, and I always wanted to go into business. And it was, I fell into that trap. Now my brother did not, but but I did. And
Yeah.
it's just, you get to the point where like, oh, I don't know what else I can do, but I'm probably good at this, so I'll just do it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Do you have any suggestions or advice for our listeners on the law of attraction? Or that was advice right there. Don't fall into that trap. you know
Mhm.
um what kind of advice do you give your clients, with the law of attraction? Where do we start? How do we get started with it?
The first thing I need people to understand is the thoughts you think, the words you say are really important, and guard them with your life. Like, don't think thoughts that you do not want. Don't say things, or put yourself down. So the words that you say are really important, and be careful what you say to others, which is something that, even though I didn't know the law of attraction, I knew that when I was teaching. I was very careful not to say things to kids that, would ever make them think less of themselves. So we have to guard ourselves that way too. And then we really do have to dig deep and take a day, take a half a day, and just lock yourself in a room and really go deep as to, who am I? What is it that I want to do? Not what somebody else thinks I should do. What is it I want to do? And then once you figure that out, start focusing on it, and focus on it every single day, multiple times a day if possible. If it's that job, if it's an amount of money, if it's the car, if it's the house, picture yourself having already achieved that goal. Picture yourself with the things that you want. And again, like, I had a friend who wanted a new house, and even though she at that time was not living in it, she would, every time she'd open a door, she would not picture the house she was in. She pictured the house that she wanted. She pictured the door that was in that house. And you just have to see yourself in those positions. And then you have to be really careful that you listen to the clues that you're given. When you're getting an idea, do you act on it or do you let it pass? I know two different people who have invented things that did not go any further than inventing them. And then a few years later, out comes this thing that they had invented prior. And are like, where could I have been? Well, yeah, but you didn't act on it. So when you get an idea, act on it. Not every idea is going to be good, but act on it anyway. And, try to use your best judgment, obviously, but you have to put action behind it. You can't just think about it. Thinking about it is just wishful thinking. You have to start taking steps, even if it's a tiny step. Take a small step towards what you want. And, it's an everyday thing.
I love
And
that.
here, the thing with the law of attraction is, when you do that, it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's just when. but you have to have that belief and faith in yourself, because faith and fear are both invisible. So it's easy for us to believe in the fears that we have. We don't always believe in the faith.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Confidence in Bloom is a celebration of self-love, a confirmation that even though you may not look like a screen star or a supermodel, and they don't even look like that, you are an amazing, desirable, brilliant, gorgeous, talented woman. We offer unconditional love to our partners, our children, our extended family, even our pets. It's high time we got out of our own way and learned to unconditionally love ourselves. In Full Bloom Styling and Coaching offers an online program combined with one-on-one coaching in confidence building, personal branding, and creating your signature fashion look. Chic definitely does come in every shape. So if you want something to believe in, start with yourself. If you'd like to be a guest here on Confidence in Bloom, contact me through Instagram at infobloomstyling, by email, tina@infobloomstyling.com, or through the Divas That Care website.